All right, so how are you guys doing? I know it's been a while. And I want us to understand, man. First, I want to say, man, if you, I know this semester is kind of coming to an end, and we're running out of chapters and things kind of talk about. And I hope this semester really has been a helpful time for you as you just look through things through this human development lens. And guys, I just want to continue to just say, man, if there's anything I can do, like please shoot me an email. Let me know. I know this is a lecture on chapter 11. And what I want to do is like, man, I just want to give us just overview this quick thing, and I wanted my idea was like, man, it's gonna be short, just this quick overview, the things to kind of think about as we go into chapter 11, thinking about late adulthood, because the next chapter we're talking about dying in spirituality, and I think I want to spend some time doing that and some time talking through some of those things. And yeah, guys, if you have any questions about your book analysis, I'm gonna try to get those graded for you pretty soon. If you have any questions about quizzes, exams, please shoot me an email. So I'm just starting, man. I don't know how you have been feeling, but man, as you read the chapter, sometimes you get this thing of like, even as you think about getting older, it may bring you down. It may make you think that getting old is, man, something that you want to avoid. I mean, this is what the commercials, this is what TV, this is what media says, man. Avoid getting old. Don't show people you're old. That's why you got anti-aging cream. You got other things to say. Hey, man, we can reduce this and increase your life and livelihood. So people are all about, man. I don't want to get old. I don't want to look old. So I don't know about you. As you're reading the chapter, maybe you're thinking, oh man, I don't know about this old thing. It seems like this is just a lot. But even as we think about that, we think about how the sometimes culture has this concept of what late adulthood is, what it means to be older. There's also this sense of we view people who are older in certain type of ways. So I want to just give a few things. I know that question can't be seen because of camera right now, but it's just what's the common. I want you to think about this. What's the common stereotypes about people in their late adulthood? We'll take time to think about that. But then also, how do you view people who are in later adulthood? Because sometimes there's this mindset that because they are old, then you know what, they're stuck in their ways. They're old, they're gonna be cranky. They're gonna be crabby. They're gonna be just not fun to be around. They're gonna be a burden when they're if they're old. Sometimes we have those mindsets, but and that's why the book talks about this idea, man. Even ageism is a thing where, man, people discriminate because of people of their age. They're saying they would say, no, 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 we think you're too old to do this. You have too many gray hairs. You've had too many birthdays. You can't do this. This discriminatory practice because of people's age, which is unfair. I mean, but hold up. Let's just even consider, man. If we look at even scripture, we see how God uses people who are a little older. You think about Abraham, how old he was. Think about Noah, how old he was. Think about Moses, how old he was. Think about all these characters throughout the Bible who had a little age on them, and God said, "You know what? I'm still going to use you to do great things." So I'm just saying, as people, as we think about, man, this idea of how we see old people, let it be informed by how God sees people who were made in His image. So yeah, gotta let that impact our idea of. So what you see here, you can see the life expectancy of people in the United States. And I hope as you're looking at this, you can see there's this gap between like men and women here. That women outlive men. I want you to think. I'm not going to give time because we can't respond here. But man, I want you to think about it, man. What's the theory? What's your theory? Why do you think it is that women outlive men? And so yeah, we got to ask that question because here's the thing, and also just understand, man, people don't die of old age. They die of like these physiological issues. So we still got to come up with this theory. What is the theory? women outlive men? I'm not going to give us an answer, but I just think it's something to consider as we think about later adulthood, that it's more likely that women are going to be those who are in later adulthood. They're more likely to outlive their husbands. So now let's talk about the physiological theories about why do we get old. People ask the question, why do we get old? Why do we age? Why does this happen to us? One of the theories is that you age because it's programmed into us. We continue to get older because this is just something in our DNA. Then we got the homeostatic like imbalance that says like, aging happens when the system in our body don't regulate the balance of the interactions of our organs. So man, there's this things get out of whack. Then you got cross linkage theory. There's more about genetics, and then you got the autoimmunity theory of your body begins to reject its own tissue. Your body turns on itself. So these are theories about why we age, because people are trying to get, because you gotta ask the question, why do we age? Why do we get old? People are trying to figure it out. We're trying to know. Because we can figure out why we age, we can maybe figure out how to stop the process. But that's a whole different day. I mean, the tales, or maybe you've seen the movies of people searching for the fountain of youth. Why? Because they want to stop the aging. So the next thing is also, now we got this physiological development. What happens is that as you're getting older, your reaction time's a little slower. But what that also means is that for long coordinated activities like playing an instrument, it becomes a little bit more difficult. Not impossible, but becomes a little bit more difficult because your reaction time is kind of slowed down. And there are people who are exceptions. There are people who are exceptions, but this is the thing we want to kind of consider here. But then also sensory ability. Now, these are things we're familiar with. We're seeing, we know, all right, man, you get older, your hearing, it's not what it used to be. Your vision is not what it used to be. Your balance is not what it used to be. And because of some of these things, it becomes like vision, man, night driving becomes hard for older adults because, man, it's hard for them sometimes for their eyes to adjust from the light to the dark. And even just think about seeing, we think about like glaucoma or cataract, like these are all things that kind of happen to the eyes that impact a person's ability to see clearly. And then other bodily system, man, you think about this physical development, man, bones become more breakable as you get older. But here's an interesting fact, even as we think about this physiological development, that one thing that can actually impact the effects of aging on you is what you believe about getting older. Hear that? There are things that we remember that's biopsychosocial model. So the psycho can affect the bio. This idea of what I believe about getting older, what I believe I should be doing in older adulthood, because if I start believing those things, I become this self-fulfilling prophecy, and my body reacts and I feel that way. And that's not to say, man, I can just think myself, I can think my way out of the physiological changes, but I can reduce the impact of some of those things by my beliefs about getting older. So we keep on going, physiological development. So, man, as you get older, one of the number one like causes of death in late adulthood is heart disease. But then you also got cancer and stroke. Man, after 65, this is what a lot of people die of. But then there's substance abuse that comes into the picture, because as you get older, you're taking a lot more medicines. And sometimes you can mix up those medicines. Or maybe the aches and pains are a lot, so you decide, I'm going to take an extra pill today. But if you think about that, man, that can happen. And sometimes it's the sense of, man, I'm taking these pills, but then I'm also drinking alcohol. So this can become substance abuse and substance misuse very easily in your older age. So it's just something to be aware of, something to know about, but can you blame them? Remember the aches and pains, man. Their body is changing so fast and so quick, man. They're going to more doctor's appointments. Their bones are becoming more breakable. They're becoming more fragile, and they're just thinking about, man, what can relieve some of this? But then, one of the saddest things that can happen to a person is Alzheimer's and dementia. So these are things that infect the brain. It can cause impairment and a deterioration of like cognitive functions. I don't know, you guys have seen the Notebook, but it's one of those stories that highlights what it's like to have Alzheimer's. The person can't remember their loved ones. Man, I remember I was scrolling through Twitter one day, and there was a mom who had Alzheimer's, and she couldn't remember her husband's name and couldn't remember the people around her. But when the storms came, she remembered she can always run to her husband. So though she couldn't remember his name, though she couldn't remember who he was, she could remember that he was a safe place. Man, so it's a sad thing, and that's what Alzheimer's kind of do to us, and dementia, and also as you get older, man, mental health becomes a thing because people are at higher risk for suicide and depression because life is difficult. They're having a lot of medical issues. A lot of things are changing for them. And their health is declining, or maybe their spouse's health is declining, or maybe they've lost someone. It just takes a much bigger toll as you get older. So then we go to cognitive development. So knowledge acquisition kind of slows down, and it's not that you can't learn more stuff. It's just like, man, it just takes a little bit more ability to get there. And one of the cool things your brain does is like, man, when there are cells that are lost, your brain starts growing new cells to trying to make up for some of that and make new connections. But then also with cognitive development, man, as you think about getting older, your vocabulary increases. It's a wonderful thing. Your vocabulary increases, but then you also have a greater awareness of world events. Because, as you know, sometimes, man, when you're retired or you're the older age, you're just sitting down and you're just reading about the world, but also the sense of like, man, you've lived some life, so you can compare the and contrast the similarities of certain events. So, and then also coming to like cognitive development, one of the questions is like, man, how do we measure like IQ and cognitions are different things when it comes to older adults? Because the question is, man, can I just test it through like a instrument, or can I just observe it? Which one's going to be more valid? And there's just a couple of things because everybody's wondering, yeah, and if I'm getting older, am I going to get less smart? But we want to kind of take a number of things into consideration. In the sense of like, man, people have different abilities, they have different experiences, and there are different types of intelligence. And this impacts, if we're going to measure it, we got to take in consideration like all these things. So there's a difficulty because you can test that and it only tests maybe one or two types of intelligence, but then you got observation. And how do you define like observation without it being like subjective? So you have these big questions here like, man, how do we test cognitive development? We're still trying to figure it out. But also, something that happens in cognitive development for older adults is that creativity, it decreases in quantity, but not in quality. So you have somebody who's an older adult who can write a song that's so beautiful, but it took them a little bit longer, or they paint a painting and it's so beautiful, but it takes them a little bit longer to do it. And and one of the things you want to think about, even as we think about getting older, the cognitive development is that like a lot of seniors don't adjust well to aging and withdraw from society and pursue creative goals. So some are just like, I'm gonna go away and I'm just gonna do my painting. I'm gonna go away. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do my songwriting or some other form of art that exercise creativity. Because sometimes they just don't adjust well to aging. Because how can you blame them, man? So much has changed so quick, so fast. So anyway, so I want to consider this. How would you define wisdom? The book talks about wisdom just a little bit, but I'm just curious how you would define. You're a believer, you know Jesus. Like we hear about wisdom. We got the book of wisdom. We got wisdom literature like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, some Psalms, and James and the New Testament. And then how do you know if a person is wise? How do you know that? These are just things to consider here. But one thing we want to consider is that, man, we know the scriptures, and one of the things is that wisdom is a result of fearing God. But it's also the sense of like this practical application of knowledge. And it's something to be valued, something to be treasured. Once if we think about the story of Solomon. Solomon had the opportunity to talk to God and ask God for anything he wanted. But what did he ask for him? He had said, Lord, if you can just give me wisdom. Oh, Solomon. Not riches, not women, not all these other things. He said, give me wisdom because he knows the value of wisdom. And you ought to know, like, even as we think about like living in late adulthood, one of the things you do get is wisdom, which is a valuable thing, more valuable than silver and gold. It is something that is sought after, like hidden treasure, as Proverbs kind of tell us. It's wisdom. So you think about getting old, you think about, man, things are going to be changed, but you get wisdom. You trust in the Lord to hold on to. You get wisdom. So this is Sternberg's theory of wisdom. And he talks about there's this interpersonal, intrapersonal, extrapersonal interest over the short and long term to achieve balance among adaptation of existing environments, shaping of existing environment, and selection of new environments. So it's a lot. It's a lot. But listen to this. I think the first part is interesting. It says wisdom is the use of one's intelligence, creativity, and common sense, and knowledge is mediated through positive ethical values toward achievement and good through a balance among all these other things. So it's helpful. This is what other people are thinking. Man, this is a theory of wisdom. Let me put one more theory of wisdom to us. This is Balch and Sterdinger. That wisdom is an expert knowledge and judgment about important, difficult, and uncertain questions associated with the meaning of life. And they have these traits of like, man, intelligence and personality traits, personality, intelligence interface, and life experience and age. So wisdom is an important thing. Even scientists are trying to think about this. How do we theorize about this? But the good thing about it is where we, as we are believers, we have a leg up on the game because we've been talking about wisdom for so long. Now we come to memory. Yes, we know sometimes, man, the memory, it gets a little harder to remember things. A perspective memory of like the things of like, you know what, I got to meet this person for this appointment. I got to go here to do this. Or the retrospective memory where I'm like, man, I'm trying to remember what did we do in 1982. But so when you think about memory, and particularly retrospective memory, you're thinking about the explicit and the implicit memory. Explicit memory refers to the things that a person you can remember, you can share, like, the plot of the movie, like a book or different things like that. And implicit is kind of like these unconscious things, like the automatic things that you just know. You know how to ride a bike, you know how to tie your shoes, you know how to drive a car, you know how to take a shower. Like these are implicit things. And when we think about these things, is that explicit memory becomes more difficult as we get up in old age. And then one of the things, as you get up, so man, as we just talked about, like getting older, what would you like to be focused on when you make it to late adulthood? What would you like to be thinking about? you consider it just for a little minute, because whatever the person you want to be when you get older there are things you ought to be thinking about now. So Erickson, so we've heard about Erickson, and this is one of Erickson's close to end stages where he talks about integrity versus despair, and integrity is that says, man, I can look back at my life and I can say I haven't wasted it. Despair says, man, look, and even if you look at that meme, there's like, man, I could have done so much more. It looks back at life and say, man, I wasted it. I didn't do all the things I could have done. And man, as I think about this theory, I think about Paul, and Paul is in 2 Timothy 4:7, and he says, I fought a good fight. I've ran the race. I finished the race. I kept the faith. He talks about this. This is Paul as he's getting to the end and expressing what can be categorized. I think it's like, excuse me, this sense of integrity where he said, I'm looking back on all the things I've done, and I've done what I could. I've been faithful with a few things. That's the thing, man. As we think about just getting into later adulthood, we want to be at this place, and we're just looking at it through Erickson's view of like, man, that place, man, I'm looking back, and I'm saying I fought a good fight. I've kept the faith. I've finished the race. I've been faithful with the things that the Lord has given me. That's where we want to be. But this is also, as we think about the people that are in the pews, man, this is where they may be. They may be wrestling through this, and they may be looking at their life, and they may be wondering, man, did I do enough, or I didn't do enough, or I did enough. They may be wondering these things and be in this identity crisis in this old age because they're looking back on life. Because you get older, it's a time of reflection. And so one of the things that happens when you get older is role discontinuity. So what that means, and he just moved it and driving, it's just a sense of like, man, the roles that you had, like the sense of like, man, the men become a little bit more nurturing in their older age. Women may become a little bit more assertive and independent in their old age. And they move toward androgyny in the sense of like they're just applying the characteristics that are needed in certain situations to help in the time that it's needed. But also fears about sexual activity, because here's the thing, it's still an option for those who are getting older. It's still a thing that happens, but there are a lot more like things that happen for hormonal balances for women, or men who can struggle with erectile dysfunction. Like there's still fears. It doesn't stop them, but there's still fears about these things that lead them to go to performance enhancing drugs. But once, and even as I think about this, guys, these are people in our pews, people in our church, so people we will encounter later who are maybe struggling with things like this. And depending on where you want to serve, whether you be on a counselor, a pastor, a teacher, or different things like that, sometimes these things just come to you. And so aging in the family. This is just saying, man, sometimes in aging in the family, man, you're building these close relationships, but sometimes, man, there's this point of conflict in late adulthood with other family members because there's a communication issue, there's a lifestyle issue, there's a parenting issue, there's a religion and politics, there's work habits and standards of household maintenance. That people in later adulthood may come over and look at the house and say, you ain't dusted in a while, have you? They may look at your lifestyle and be like, I don't think I didn't raise you like that. Or parenting, be like, why don't you talk to that child? Or why don't you leave that child alone? You'll get these points of conflict, and I'm pretty sure you can add so many more to this. Anyway, so one of the things that happen, remember, widowhood. And because we know about the life expectancy and the age gaps, women are more likely to find themselves like in this place because they outlive men. It's hard. And one of the things I looked at the picture down here is a move from a movie called Driving Miss Daisy with Morgan Freeman in it. And it's this widow who has just she had a wreck, and they took her vehicle from her, and now she has a chauffeur, and she doesn't want the chauffeur. And if you hadn't seen it, it's a very interesting movie because as you look at it through this lens, you can see some of these things that are happening for like those in later adulthood. So It's a good movie. But anyway, in widowhood, man, there's anger, depression, shock, and grief, and these feelings don't differ. It doesn't matter how the death happened or when it happened. They're still common to people. And then, but in widowhood, you have new responsibilities. The things your husband or wife used to do, they don't do those no more. So you have to figure out, how do I do it? So and there's also a shift in social relationships, in the sense of like, oh man, this is my mother-in-law side, this is my father-in-law, and these are my in-laws. But now my husband or wife is not here to kind of navigate some of those things. But one of the things we have is like, man, technology has improved some of those interactions. So technology has helped those who may be widows, may have a hard time maybe adjusting and socializing more. Like, technology helps. You'll see grandma on Facebook or granddaddy on Facebook more, because it gives them the interaction and catch up with some of the people that they don't get to talk to as often. So don't get mad at your parents or your grandparents being on Facebook. Okay. And then relationship with others. So there's this sense of like, man, sometimes there's this activity theory where they engage in more activity. It helps them, but there's also a sense of like sometimes they're disengaged, disengaged from some of these things. And then social emotional theory. And all right, guys. And then, all right, patterns of work. So just the last things we just think about, man. Yes, the patterns of work change. Reformers kind of change, or what you can and cannot do kind of slows down. But also, this is people in more that age of like retirement or close to retirement. So anyway, guys, it was quick, probably it was quick, just overview of chapter 11. I hope it's just helpful. Man, if you have any questions about this, like, man, please let me know. So you guys have a good day. Yeah, and we'll talk soon about chapter 11, about death and dying and spirituality. All right, have a good day. And if I don't see, well, I probably won't see you. So happy Thanksgiving.